Welcome to I Didn't Sign Up for This, a podcast brought to you by Alzheimer's Arkansas. I'm Carolyn, your host. We are going to dive into the complexities and challenges of being a caregiver to someone with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. This is just not about the disease. This is about the caregiving experiences, the challenges, the mishaps, the miscommunications, and understanding of how this disease affects families, communities, and our society as a whole. Thank you to Elder Independence Home Care for sponsoring us and underwriting to make this possible, to bring this podcast to the podcast land and you listening. In this episode, I had the opportunity to speak with Kim Clatworthy, the owner of Elder Independence Home Care. We will discuss her unique perspective as a professional and a family member in caring for loved ones with Alzheimer's and dementia. Also, I would like to thank Kim and her company for underwriting this podcast as a whole. Thank everyone out there in podcast world for joining us today. Today I have a really great visitor with us today, Kim Clatworthy of Elder Independence. We want to thank her for taking time out of her busy schedule and for underwriting this podcast series. And I am going to let her introduce herself because she knows herself best.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you. It's so good to be here. We're so happy to underwrite this podcast series. We're really excited about it. So I'm the owner of Elder Independence Home Care. I've owned the company since 2014. And we help families with their home care needs, including Alzheimer's and dementia.
Thank you for that. So the goal of our podcast, Alzheimer's Arkansas podcast, is to talk about the difficult part of caregiving, the things that isolate us, cause depression, even some embarrassment. Mm-hmm. Because when we're doing caregiving, we think that our issues, problems, circumstances are unique. Mm-hmm. So the more we talk about the difficult part of caregiving, then the more people can relate and understand that what I'm going through really isn't quite different. Of course, it's unique, but a lot of people deal with it.
Of course.
So you being in the in-home care industry, I think you've seen a lot of challenging things.
Yes.
So give us a little example of some of the challenging things you've seen that probably cause embarrassment to some people.
So I think one of the most common challenges that people face that I hear about is whether it's a parent or a spouse that's changing with the dementia, if they go somewhere in public and their loved one does something unusual or probably not necessarily socially acceptable. So that's what I hear most often that they struggle with is, I know what I'm dealing with, but when I go in public, the people around us don't understand, why she's trying to take her shirt off in public or, eating with food flying out of her mouth or, those kind of things. And so that's often a struggle for people.
And I would imagine that's one of those things that make them take a step to in-home care because now they no longer feel like they can take them out in public.
Exactly. Yeah.
So in one part, so we're going to get a little deeper than that. So one part of caregiving, and I get the thing that it's like the trigger. So recently, a few family members, when it comes to incontinence and changing diapers.
Right.
And a part of, as a family member, maybe your loved one, your spouse, your parent, you think you can do that.
Right.
But that's part of that. Did I sign up for this?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like you don't really realize.
Right.
So how do family members deal with that part of?
I can say that that's also a challenge. And so, you take somebody who is not necessarily a caregiving type person, and all of a sudden they have to do those difficult things. I know for myself personally, with my own dad, trying to maneuver and manipulate that. And he didn't want me to see him in that way, especially early on. And so that was a challenge. He didn't, and same with my sisters. And so we all just had to strap on, a big pair of pants and do it because it's necessary. And you figure out ways to do it to allow people to keep their dignity if they're concerned about you seeing them. I mean, I've given people showers with their men with their boxers and t-shirts on.
Does that work?
It does work. Yeah, it does. We start out with everything covered, and I put a towel up and we do the bathing, and I hand them the sponge or the washcloth and let them do all the parts they don't want me to see, and they feel good about it. So we can manage to do that and keep everything covered, and they feel like they have their dignity, and their wives don't get mad at me for seeing them naked. So, and I mean, there are so many challenges because it's from everything related to conversations that they're now having repetitively, explaining the same thing that they've said over and over again, to doing the difficult things with showering, bathing, toileting, explaining to people why they're
needing help.
And so we don't really see, oftentimes we don't see those struggles on the outside. And people can, with dementia, can look normal in conversations even for a long time.
Yes.
And so
the dignity part and, understanding, I think it's important for caregivers, the world, to know that just because someone is diagnosed with a dementia does not mean their dignity and their intelligence is not still present. Like,
Absolutely.
They still have emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
They still have certain types of, they can get embarrassed. They have these unique set of characteristics that we're trying to make sure that they're okay. So here's a question. So what does your sister do for a living?
Well, both of my sisters were in healthcare, fortunately.
So you're unique because I do get family members and when they're children. So a daughter having to bathe their father. Not only is it difficult for their father, but it's difficult for them to have to see their father in such a vulnerable position. So I was asking to see if you ever had your sisters talk about how difficult it is to...
Right. So there's that part of the challenge of seeing them in a way that you don't, none of us ever want to see our parents, really. But there's also the fact that, like my dad was this strong man who had all of the answers all of the time. And then all of a sudden, really in a blink of an eye, and our situation was a little unique in that he went into a surgery completely normal and doing complicated math and talking about investments and this and that, and he came out and couldn't speak hardly, and he knew that something happened during the surgery. We didn't really understand all of it at that time, but so here was this strong man that all of a sudden couldn't communicate, and we felt like we lost him during that. And in a way we did. He was never the same. So that's a challenge. It's difficult. It's hard on the heart, for sure.
It is. And it's the grief of the loss of a part of him. And a lot of us don't recognize that. I like talking about dementia and caregiving because every time you talk about something, it brings up something different. Like you could go out on a whole different subject matter. But let's talk about some other challenges of caregivers. So one thing I hear a lot, because I do refer and sometimes say, hey, how about in-home care? And they cringe. Do you ever have that happen? Like they're just kind of testing you? You feel like having other people in their homes?
Of course, yes.
So share some of those ways for people to get over other people being in their homes.
Yeah, I think first of all, it's recognizing when there's an actual, a need. Like, we really need to give ourselves a break here, that we can't do all of this. So it's time for us to reach out and ask for help. And oftentimes people ask me, how do I know when is the right time? What are the signs? And I think what we see a lot is that, like I said, my dad was this strong, vibrant person. But when you see the home is no longer like it used to be, it's not tidy. They don't appear to be eating. There's spoiled food in the refrigerator. Bills aren't getting paid. Phone calls aren't getting returned. Doctor's appointments are being missed. And so all of those things are happening. And it typically takes some of those things to get the conversation started. And then oftentimes it's still not until there's a crisis. We've got to have somebody now. Dad's in the hospital. He can't take care of mom, and we still have full-time jobs, so we can't do it full-time either. So that's usually it's out of a need.
Yeah, the crisis.
The crisis,
something happened. So what about the physical part? So I think you hit the nail on the head, because I hear a lot of people like, I can't let people come in my house.
Yeah.
So can you just give a little insight on like how unjudgmental
right
in-home care people are, and how like that's normal to be your house to be disarray?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Kind of talk about that a little bit.
And we do everything we can to help people understand that we're not really focused on the state of your home. We're really focused on coming in and coming alongside you and helping share some of the burden and taking some of the burden off of you. And it's difficult, especially for the people that have been used to being able to do everything, and they keep everything so pristine, or even if that's not the case, but it's just, I really don't want to let you into my personal world,
Yes.
and there are people who, of course, and I'm, could easily be one of those, in that it's hard for me, to let people, that's my sanctuary. It's my place. And to allow people to come in, even though they're going to be there to help you, it's difficult. And so we work really hard to help people understand that the focus then becomes, how can we help you? What can we do? We can help you clean up some of the things that you've not been able to get to. And we understand why you haven't been able to get to those things, because you've got your hands full.
You got your hands full. Mm-hmm. So if you had one other thing that you would say, hey, let's debunk this myth of the challenges, like things you feel like people are embarrassed about or have difficulty in this caregiving journey?
There are so many things, and they're so unique and so individual, right? So, everything from, I should be able to do this.
That's a good one.
This is my spouse. This is someone I've loved more than I've not, more than I've been on this earth. And they don't ever remember a time when they didn't have the other one. And that's difficult. It's really difficult to understand that that person is still the person that you love. They're just behaving differently, and can't control that. And so we have to step out of the world that we knew with them into a new world. But there can still be gratification and great times together. And also, I had someone that I spoke to today just before I came here, and he said, we've been married 67 years, and we've never raised our voice in our home. We didn't raise our voice at our 3 children, and we certainly didn't raise our voices at each other. And I thought, wow, that's saying something, right? Mm-hmm. But now she's frustrated, and she yells at him. And I said, well, what do you think causes that? When does she get frustrated? And he said, when I keep telling her to stop asking, don't you remember you asked me that 10 seconds ago? Stop asking me the same question. So it's just a matter of learning how to adapt to the new normal.
And that brings on education, because what I hear you also saying is having to educate, and like, this is going to happen, they're going to repeat. So how do you, as the caregiver, change? Because you're not going to change the disease.
Exactly.
But you can only change the way
you respond
to the disease. So you spend a lot of time educating as well. And this is a difficult disease to educate on, because everybody is so unique. In-home care is such a blessing in some ways. And these days, I say these days, post-pandemic, we hear a lot about caregiver shortage. How do you help people in? Because one of the parts of, I didn't sign up for this, people call like, I can't find help, when they really, like, they get to that crisis, right? It's like, how do I find help? So what do you say quality in-home care looks like? Because there's a lot of companies out there. So tell me what
there
quality in-home care.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And there are a lot of quality home care companies out there. And for some people, it might look like some people that they know coming in and helping provide care for them. And a lot of times what you find is that those people aren't trained either, right? So it's trying to find a company that has, I call it a bench of people that are waiting and ready, that are trained, that understand dementia, the disease process, that know how to come alongside you and help you understand better ways, as well as the caregiver, to give yourself a break, that you're not perfect. We don't have all the answers, and each person, like you said, is unique and individual. And so I think finding that company that hires people not only that are trained, but that have a heart and a passion for what you're going through, right? And what you need. And so I think those are important things. Somebody who's a company that's reputable, that's been around a long time. Elder Independence has been around 25 years. And then just people that have the same philosophy of caring that you would have if, it were one of your loved ones. We try to treat people like they're ours, like they're our family, an extension of our family. And we hire people that we feel like will do the same.
Okay, let's say I hired Elder Independence, and you sent out like this great person from your point of view. But they just don't mesh with my family and the personality of my loved one.
Right.
Do I fire you, or I'm like, I'm done with Elder? Like, what's the steps? Do I because most people I got to fire them. They don't know how, and they don't know. So what's the steps when it just doesn't happen?
We let them know on the front end that we guarantee compatibility. So if we send out who we think is our rock star, but you don't, personalities don't mesh or whatever. And I mean, we had a circumstance recently where a husband that we care for has a wife with dementia. We care for him physically and we care for her emotionally, but she felt like the caregiver was a threat to her.
Okay.
So, that lady is hitting on my husband. I want her out of my home. Well, of course, we understood that and we make that change. The husband loved her. He thought she was an amazing caregiver.
Bet he did.
But
that's why she was saying it.
Right. And so she sensed that. She understood that and she didn't like it. And so we put somebody else in there, and that worked out much better. It was actually a male.
Makes sense to me.
It worked. Yeah. So then he said, maybe I should be jealous of him. And I said, well,
please not, let's do this.
Yeah, exactly.
What are we going to do?
Yeah.
Please not do this. So, and those are common things that happens in this caregiving experience that a lot of people don't think about. People still being jealous and feeling those emotional attachments or is she paying attention to my husband? Yeah. And we don't think about that part of our nature. We are still people at 70, 80, 90 years old, right?
Yeah.
With those same feelings. So that was, and it's kind of, maybe in some ways kind of cute. And
Yeah. Well, it depends on who you
who
ask.
you ask,
Yeah.
right? But like for
Yeah.
her to have like a jealousy for like that's my husband, like it says she's still in there.
Yeah. She's in there. Absolutely. She's in there. And they've been together many, many years. So part of that is her going back to where she, when they were dating and infatuated with each other. And he may not be showing her quite as much attention in her mind. So it was paying a lot of attention to another lady who was, by the way, getting him dressed and undressed and helping him with his shower. She didn't like it. She didn't like it at all. So, you find ways to work around those things just to understand where people are coming from. And it can be a challenge.
And as we kind of wrap up some of this, these are some of the things we will talk about, like intimacy. These are very difficult situations
Sure.
that we can find ourselves into. I'm sure you could talk about patients hitting on your staff. How do they handle that?
Well, redirection is always a good first step. So they do that. And when that doesn't work, we have just direct and honest conversation. That's not appropriate. We're going to move on and do something else. And, I'm your caregiver, not your girlfriend. And then we move on and till the next time.
Until the next time.
And it comes up again. Yeah.
And great caregivers, people that I know they're educated and they understand. So that's part of the education of personnel and caregivers to understand also that people, they have intelligence and we're sexual beings until the end. And
right.
you should expect some of those mishaps or that flirtation or whatever that
right.
Especially for men, but it happens a lot in women too, right?
It does. Yeah,
I think that's
happens with men and women. Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't think it happened with women.
It does. Yeah, we've had women especially, their husbands have passed away, and we go in to provide care for them to give the family caregivers a respite, and they, we've had women that just all they wanted to talk about was a boyfriend. And so we go along with that. That's okay. No harm, no foul. We just have loving conversation about whatever they want to talk about. It's their world, and we just step into it, as I said, and it can be tough to navigate all of that, but you just do the best you can and do it from a place of love and concern and compassion.
So I want to thank you today for sharing some intimate parts of your life, some professional experience, and just let caregivers out there in this podcast world understand that your issues may be unique to you, but they aren't really different from other people. And you don't have to be alone. And it does cause isolation, caregiving. And it can, but you have to have a goal and make steps to make sure you're not isolated. Have a plan not to be isolated.
Exactly.
So thank you again, Kim.
Thank you, Carolyn.
And say bye-bye to the podcast world.
Bye.
Thank you, Kim Clatworthy and Elder Independence for supporting I Didn't Sign Up for This. Your story will help many lives. Please subscribe, review, and share this podcast. Thank you again, Elder Independence, for underwriting this podcast. I didn't sign up for this.